Good evening. This is the CUNY Forum, and my name is Bob Liff. This is a monthly town meeting that brings prominent New Yorkers together with faculty and students of the Edward T. Rogowsky Internship Program in Government and Public Affairs. Ray Kelly, a city kid from Hell's Kitchen, remains one of the city's most popular police chiefs, even if he had an easy act to follow after Howard Safir and Bernie Kerik, who was Mayor Giuliani's last two police chiefs. As with his boss, Michael Bloomberg, Kelly has been lauded for overseeing continuing drops in crime, along with a lessening of the acrid racial tension witnessed through much of Giuliani's mayoralty. But Kelly's aggressive deployment of police techniques like stop and frisk has provoked those tensions once again. Moreover, recent revelations that the NYPD has broadly monitored the city's Muslim community have threatened to spark tensions as we head toward a mayoral election next year. About 90% of the 700,000 stop and frisk stops last year were of Black and Latino New Yorkers, a majority of them young men. About 10% of those resulted in an arrest or summons, while 1% led to the recovery of a weapon, the main justification for the stop and frisk in the first place. Police officials say the result has been 8,000 weapons removed from the street, including 800 handguns. The homicide rate has plummeted, with 5,000 fewer homicides in the last 10 years than in the decade before. A majority of victims of homicides and shootings are themselves Black or Hispanic. The Police Commission has argued most forcefully recently before the City Council, pointing out that an aggressive stop and frisk policy is partly responsible for thousands of New Yorkers, the vast majority of them being minority, still being alive. In the case of monitoring Muslims, critics contend that we should not be shredding the Constitution because the attackers of 9/11 were Muslim. However, even moderates who back the surveillance program ask why police cannot monitor publicly accessible sites such as mosque or college gatherings before a specific threat arises. Building good intelligence in times of peace, they argue, will allow police to better respond in times of troubles. These activities put Kelly at the forefront of a debate of how far police can stretch the concept of probable cause and reasonable suspicion, the constitutional requirements at the core of the Fourth Amendment rights. At the same time, the NYPD has successfully thwarted attacks in subways and on Times Square that we know of, and likely many more that we do not know of. There has not been a repeat of 9/11, and maybe, just a maybe, the aggressive tactics deployed by the NYPD get a major share of the credit. We are joined by 4 New Yorkers who take part in the debate over whether the NYPD's aggressive actions upset the fragile balance between security and freedom. Eugene O'Donnell is a professor at John Jay College in the Department of Law and Police Science. Imam Al-Hajj Talib Abdur-Rashid is the president of the Islamic Leadership Council of Metropolitan New York and the imam at the Mosque of the Islamic Brotherhood in Harlem. Jumaane Williams is a city councilman from a Flatbush-based district in Brooklyn who was himself stopped by police last September at the West Indies Day Parade. And Leonard Levitt is the founder and editor of NYPDconfidential.com, a must-see site that provides a unique window into the goings-on at One Police Plaza. Councilman, let me start with you. At the West Indies Day Parade, you were trying to make your way to an event at the Brooklyn Museum and were stopped, and drew a lot of attention as to why you were stopped.
One, thank you for having me. You said a lot of things in your opening statement that I hope we could get back to address. But yes, on the Labor Day, myself and Kirsten John Foy, who's a high-level staff person for the Public Advocate of the City of New York, were trying to get back to a location that we were invited to for a function. The police tried to say it was a frozen zone, but it really wasn't. It was just it's for crowd control. They put barriers up, but it's for guests and dignitaries to go back. We showed IDs. We were allowed in, and then we were stopped at another location. They either didn't believe we were who we said we were, or they just really didn't care, and we were both placed under arrest for some time.
And you believe that your race had a lot to do with why?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of it. And as we go forward, the thing that I like to bring to attention is there are policies like stop and frisk that allow a culture to fester within the NYPD that at its least iteration, its most minimum, things like that happen to someone like me. At its maximum, someone like Ramali Graham gets killed unarmed in his bathroom.
Young man in the Bronx who was shot in his apartment.
Once you begin treating people other than and allow people to treat people depending on how they look, then that's the problem that you come up with. So I've been actually pushing police issues and police accountability for some time even before then. But I think I was able to use that incident to try to just highlight all the things that are going on. And I believe if I wasn't a council member, I'd probably just have a record like many other young Black and Latino males.
Imam, you've worked very closely with the police in Harlem, you're very active in ecumenical affairs. When you heard about this fairly broad kind of undercover work, what generally falls under the rubric of Muslim spying, what was your reaction?
Well, a couple of reactions. First, our work in Harlem and the work of many imams throughout the city is dealing with things that go on in the neighborhood on a precinct level. You know, we're not anti-police or anti-policing. But when the Associated Press stories broke, to be very honest with you, the whole thing sounded very familiar to me. I'm quite old enough to be familiar with COINTELPRO. I'm quite old enough to be familiar with the activities of the NYPD intelligence unit throughout the decades. And so when I saw that the sanctity of mosques were being violated, when I saw that the surveillance had expanded from Muslim houses of worship to really every facet of Muslim participation in the public square, including, you know, elementary school children and that type of thing, I said to myself, where the things that we've been able to at least slow down on the federal level have been running rampant in New York City. And this is the direct result of the lack of police accountability here in New York to the city council and other agencies that should be providing oversight.
Lenny, is this a change? Is what we've been seeing lately a change, or is it just that we're focusing on it more?
No, it's a big change. And the change is that in contrast to Giuliani, who's had his own big problems, Mayor Bloomberg knows nothing about the police, and he's taken a completely hands-off attitude towards them. By doing that, he's created a Frankenstein monster, and that's Ray Kelly, who is a different person now than he was when he was commissioner the first time, and a different person now than he was when he took office. He's given Kelly more power than any police commissioner in the history of New York, and unfortunately the power has gone to his head. There's no accountability whatsoever in the police department. Bloomberg ran on a platform, on a promise. He promised me in an interview that there would be more transparency than existed under Mayor Giuliani. There is no transparency now, none. Nobody knows what the police department is doing. The Muslim spying, we don't have a clue as to how deep that spying has gone. I wrote a story recently. The intelligence division was up in Buffalo, New York, spying on the Somali community there. What's that about? This line that we only follow leads? What leads?
Yeah, Gene, you've worked with the police commissioner. Has he changed? This sense that, you know, something has changed, at least in terms of the visibility, but has Ray Kelly changed? Has the police department changed around these civil liberties issues?
The department has changed. I mean, I was a police officer in the 80s, and crime didn't matter, to be blunt. You could run a precinct and have no idea what was going on. There could be stratospheric levels of disorder and crime in the community, and you didn't know. So they instituted a thing called CompStat, which was a good thing when it started, which was making people accountable, having strategies, being forward-thinking.
CompStat tracked crime in a precinct on a day-to-day basis.
And tracked accountability, and you didn't just shrug your shoulders when you had a serious crime. You had to do something about it, and that was all valuable. And stop and frisk is part of that, using that as a tool. But I think what we're seeing in recent years now is there's been a sort of a disconnect from. We're starting to see enforcement that I think is no longer rationalized. There's no rationale for it other than we need to do more. But it is important to look at the city in terms of where it was and where it is, both in terms of crime but also in terms of terrorism. The department has to be as proactive as they can be. What you really need is, as has been said here, you need political people. You need political leadership at the state legislature and in the city council to push back and to weigh in and to say what it is they think the department should do differently. It's not realistic to think the police are ever not going to be in the intelligence business. They're going to be in the intelligence business. It's not realistic to ever think they're not going to do stop and frisk. The hard thinking has to go into what the right levels are, how it's overseen, and what the rationales are for doing it.
What is the city council doing?
Well, the fact of the matter is, what he was talking about is probably the primary problem that I have. So there may be some things that we're hearing about that maybe they have legitimate reasons for, but there is no accountability. So they're able to do whatever they want. They don't have to report to the city council. They mention the handshoe agreement a lot, but that's a reactive measure. If you can understand it, you need resources to go to a courtroom, go before a judge. We need some independent oversight. And my colleagues and I put together a package of legislation I'm hoping gets passed. I have another colleague, Brad Lander, we're putting forth Inspector General legislation. We're hampered, though, by some things. Sometimes we as council members punk out, but there are times where we're hampered by the charter and able to do more. And we do need people on the state level to step in and then change some of the things that we think are problematic. Also, I'm hoping that we can get the Justice Department or the Attorney General to step in and say that there's a problem here, help us get some oversight, because we're not getting that leadership from the mayor, we're not getting that leadership from the commissioner. I always try to make a difference between, I believe, the many men and women who want to be good police officers and many who are, and we call them blue shirts, but they're not getting the proper leadership from above. They're not getting the proper direction from above. And if that's not happening at the top, it's going to turn out very bad at the bottom.
You know, Bob, there's been a very important development in this whole struggle around the surveillance as of last Friday. The Associated Press was again released documents, secret police documents, showing that the targets of this widespread warrantless surveillance in New York City is not just the Muslims. Really, they're spying on everybody. They are back, and it's very evident that there are politics involved in the spying. They're spying on people for political reasons. They're spying on social justice activists. I found it very interesting that when I looked at one of those documents, that the document starts off expressing an interest in what they called our convert masjids, which are the masjids that are founded by African Americans or are primarily populated by African Americans. And by the way, in those NYPD documents, the only non-immigrant group cited in those documents are African Americans, which I think is very significant. But when I looked at the list, they mentioned the mosque that I'm the leader of, the Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood, by name. But interestingly enough, they didn't mention us in relation to any terrorists or suspicion of terrorism. They mentioned us in relation to the Sean Bell case. And they said specifically, we have a particular concern about Sean Bell rhetoric, quote unquote.
Sean Bell is the young man in Queens who was
racially profiled and killed. And so, you know, the fact that they're also watching mosques, the African-American mosques, to see what we had to say about Sean Bell shows that there's a connection between all of these different issues on the community level.
Gene made a point about how you can't stop intelligence. What is wrong with, if it's a publicly accessible place, a college organization, you know, even walking into a mosque? I can walk into your mosque. What is wrong with using, walking into publicly accessible places, and whether you can call it intelligence, you can call it collecting information. A police department wants a baseline of information, so if there is trouble, they have more knowledge. It's, the analogy is a fire department that wants to know the layout of every building in the city, so they can pull it up in case they have to go in.
There's several things wrong. Okay, now if all things being equal, what you're saying may not sound as heinous, but all things aren't equal. And where they're focusing the resources are the problem. And what I've been pushing is what's important to notice, that they come from one person today and another person tomorrow. And that's clear in the new information that we're getting. So what we're saying is happening in the Black Latino communities, happening in the LGBT communities, happening in the homeless communities, happening in Muslim communities, historically disenfranchised communities, because you can get away with it a little better there. And now it's spreading out. It's getting wider and wider. It's going on to New Orleans. There's a lot of crazy things that are going on, and my primary thing is now that this stuff is going on unchecked, There's nobody there to say whether this is good, this is bad. Is there really a purpose for what it's doing? Why is it focused on these communities if there's no real leads leading to these communities? Why are we looking at liberal organizations that have nothing to do with terrorism? Why are we looking at mosques that are professing the solidarity with Sean Bell? This is taxpayer money. This is not, and they're not the CIA. They should do some intelligence, but it's not the CIA. I think they're beginning to run aground of what their job function is. And every 20 years, there's a commission of some sort to kind of just figure out what the police department is doing. You had the Knapp, you had the Mullen. I think it's about 20 years now. I think that there is some deserved attention that's needed there to figure out exactly what's going on, see what's legitimate and what's not legitimate. But you can't have the police making a decision about what the police do. You need some independence to figure out what's going on.
I mean, is this a case of civilian control of the military? Is this?
Well, let me say before
Yes.
I answer that on the Muslim thing. It's not just it's not just that the police department monitors public whatever. They send undercovers into Muslim student associations at City University, at Brooklyn College, I think at Baruch. And the difference is that when it came out with the private colleges, the presidents were all yelling and screaming, this is no good. The chancellor of the City University hasn't said a word, and he's hiding behind his public relations guy. He's known about this. I reported about this in September, about the infiltration. It's not just going to public access, it's infiltrating these organizations. Now, what was the other question that you just asked?
I mean,
but let me just correct your opening. Jumani,
I was,
wait a minute. Jumani mentioned, was
we worked together at
concerned about it
Newsday. He used
also.
to correct me all the time. Right.
The idea that the police department stopped that Times Square bombing, they had nothing to do with that. The thing
It
just
was-
didn't go
it
off.
was- and it was a vendor who actually found the
A
thing.
Muslim vendor.
A Muslim vendor, right?
And worse, when you talk about Washington, the Justice Department, forget about it. Obama has turned away from this because there was another incident, the most serious terrorism instance, as Gene, I'm sure will agree, when they had this guy from Colorado, Najibul Azazi, who came to New York. The FBI was tracking him. They were all over this case. The NYPD on its own sent out detectives to question their own informants. And what did the informant do? The informant tipped off the father. And the NYPD still didn't tell the FBI what they had done. They almost blew the case. And so what did Obama do? Very interesting. He called up Ray Kelly to congratulate him on this thing that Washington refuses to acknowledge that there is a problem here between the NYPD and other law
But
enforcement
is
organizations.
this an analogy to civilian control of the military?
Absolutely it is. And Bloomberg, as I'm saying, when Jumani talks about no accountability, he's absolutely right. It's Bloomberg's responsibility. He has abdicated his responsibility by giving it all to Ray Kelly. You can't do that. Even Lindsay, when he started the Knapp Commission, they made a big fuss. So we have to control the military. Bloomberg has not done that. And now he's in the position, he's sort of like the Wilpons with Bernie Madoff. He's in so deep with Kelly, he can't back out.
Is this a change in culture in the department?
Well, you need political leadership. These are all first and foremost political questions. But
what about the question of this?
But elected officials have to lead on this. The police department has to push the envelope. I think they have a duty to do that. I don't think you need Ray Kelly to be the Civil Liberties Union. You need him to push the envelope. The question is, as you try to secure the city, by the way, a lot of these initiatives are broadly popular with the public. So this means elected officials have to talk to their own communities and convince them that things should be done differently. And I'm not sure that's an easy sell. There's a lot of public support for these initiatives, but you need the commissioner to push the envelope in terms of stop and frisk and in terms of intelligence. The police, by the way, have made some, not in this city as much, but even in this city, the Sackett Street bombing case was a case made in Brooklyn before 9/11, in which a cop on patrol was advised by somebody that his neighbor was running a bomb factory. An incredible allegation. He was running a bomb factory. So it's not that the police cannot be taken out of the issues of intelligence. It's also easy to criticize this, and criticism is necessary. But as they push the envelope, it's really important that there be oversight, that there be criticism. But you don't want them to be paralyzed either. Remember, that's one of the problems that you had with the federal government before 9/11. It was easier to do nothing in many cases. It was easier to punt, given the choice of taking action or not taking action. Given a chance to investigate terrorism, the FBI often wanted to investigate bank robbery, because it was easy. You get 40-year-old recidivists, but terrorism could take years. It's politically sensitive. You could be criticized for it. So they didn't do it. And the evidence is that the 9/11 attackers felt that nobody was on their trail. They were country miles ahead of law enforcement. So again, I'm not in any way advocating any of these particular initiatives, this dragnet approach, surveilling innocent Americans. But both of these issues, stop and frisk and terrorism, they require a lot of hard thinking. Buzzwords and slogans and sound bites are not an answer to this. You have to look at every particular initiative and say, what's the right size of this initiative? What are the legal issues, and how do you make sure it's not abused? But you can't afford to just wave your hand and say, we're not going to have surveillance of any kind, we're not going to have intelligence of any kind, and we're going to suspend
I just want to jump in for a second. One, I think there's some good things that Ray Kelly has done. I'm glad that we're safer in some instances. We're not as safe as we should be in certain communities, particularly when it comes to violent crime. I'm glad that there hasn't been another terror attack. I'm happy about that. I'm worried about sometimes when we mention public opinion, because public opinion has been great for some of the worst travesties that have happened. The reason that, and stop and frisk, by the way, is not one of the ones that are high up on the public opinion. But the reason that we've been able to get away with so many things, whether it's Japanese internment camps, whether it's communist Red Scares, because we put the word safe in. So we have to fight against that word, we're keeping you safer. When in actuality, I don't believe these things are. When it comes to stop and frisk, if you look at their own statistics, although it's up 70,000 or 80,000 from last year, so are shootings. If you look at the top 3 shootings, precincts in the city, there's absolutely no correlation between how many stops were there and how many guns were taken off, or rather how many shootings there were. So these things, there are no correlation. It's lazy policing that they can then say, we're doing this, we're doing something to keep you safe. So there is some education in the public, so we have to be able to say that these are actually not keeping you safe. It's actually doing the reverse, which I believe that it is. And there is some hard thinking that has to be going to it. And I do believe we agree on one thing. One of the major problems is there's just no oversight. There's nobody saying this is wrong, this is right. It's Ray Kelly and the mayor doing craziness with what the mayor said is his personal army.
And so one of the key things here, there has been significant changes in the police department because it's very apparent that now that we're on this side of 9/11 and we're in the 21st century, that a decision was made that really is very much in keeping with decisions of police departments in large cities across the country, wherein the NYPD has become increasingly militarized, and the approach is a military approach to policing. At one time in this city, a couple of decades ago, when David Dinkins was mayor, a move was being made towards the approach of community policing here in New York City. And then when Mayor Giuliani became the mayor, we veered away from that, and now we find ourselves getting further and further away from the concept of what's called community policing, which is an approach that never really has gotten a fair chance or a fair shake here in New York City.
You know, it's interesting with the community policing. Ray Kelly was the guy, his first term, who was pushing community policing.
Exactly.
And he got murdered by Giuliani and Bratton. They made fun of him. They called it social work. He believed in it. You don't hear anything from Ray Kelly now about it. I
believe he's on record against it, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, he may be now against it, but you know, he was the real, he really pushed on it.
Is there any rational, I mean, is there any rational way to think that 700,000 stops were based on reasonable suspicion? Some some significant percentage maybe, but is it rational to think that half of them were done by, had a reason for reasonable suspicion, probable cause, or is there statistics padding, or are you meeting a quota?
The reason is search on site Black and Latino young men. That's the primary reason. There's been more stop and frisk now than the past 3 mayors combined. And it's less than 1% actually that has.
It's walking while black, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean,
it's been less than 1% of guns that have been found, and it's less than 10% of people who've even gotten citations. Now, what they say is they're following the numbers, following the crime. I'm the first to admit that unfortunately, black on black or black and Latino crime is high. But when you look at where they're following, it's not even having an effect, one. And if you look at marijuana arrests, they're also not following the numbers because the numbers say that young white people use marijuana at higher rates. but it's still 80–90% of young Black and Latino men and women that are getting these arrests and these citations, these tickets. So it's not a matter of following numbers. It's not a number of efficacy, because it's not effective in terms of what it is they're trying to do.
Well, let me give you a little historical background. I know Gene will agree with this. There used to be an outfit called the Street Crime Unit, and their job solely was to get guns off the street. But the problem with that is, under Giuliani, under Howard Safir, you know, they thought the Street Crime Unit was so great that they increased it threefold and didn't properly train the officers who were going out there. The result was Amadou Diallo.
Right.
And so what did Kelly do? One of the first things Kelly did when he became police commissioner the second time, knowing the politics and how uncomfortable everybody was with the Street Crime Unit, he disbanded it completely. And in its stead, we have this crazy stop and frisk.
Yeah, and I think at some point the legislature is going to have to weigh in on this.
In what? In what way?
This is Terry versus Ohio. This is
Explain what that.
Yeah, and
court,
it's
that
a
case
Supreme
was.
Court case that authorized this. And if you read the Terry case, there's some specific language in there. I have it right here. They say stop and frisk is a serious intrusion upon the sanctity of the person, which may inflict great indignity and arouse strong resentment. This is the Supreme Court speaking. The idea of a Terry stop, for any of our criminal justice people in the audience and anybody else, you know that it was the police observing people really about to rob people, to do serious crimes. It was not, I don't think, ever intended to become sort of a blanket, a dragnet thrown out across the city looking for
I mean, the classic
weapons.
legal argument of, the classic civil liberties versus security argument is that should 9 people go free, I'm trying to think of the numbers that, do you
Better
wanna,
than 20 guilty people go free.
Right, 20 guilty people go. You would rather see 20 guilty people go free rather than take one innocent person and catch them up in a dragnet.
Well, the idea here was that the police would be on patrol. They had to protect themselves. They had to aggressively stop crime. Prior to Terry, you had to wait till somebody got mugged. So Terry allowed the cops to watch somebody who was casing a store, was following Mrs. McGillicuddy home, and it allowed them to stop and ask that person. I don't think anybody would have foreseen a situation where you'd be doing 700,000 of these a year. And there has to be a better rationale than we have to do more this year because it's more than last year. There's got to be another rationale besides Comstat.
I assume that this affects young men and young men in your
absolutely.
congregation.
So the problem is not just stop and frisk; it's stop and frisk on steroids. It's the abuse of stop and frisk, and the same thing with surveillance. I think that it's a mistake, a critical mistake, to look at what's going on now and to separate it from what has gone on in previous decades. Those of us who are in the African American Muslim community, for instance, we have a history with all of these different initiatives. As I mentioned at the beginning, the intelligence division on NYPD used to be called the Red Squad. They used to have what we called a black desk, where African Americans, were the focus of the intelligence activities. And so the Muslim community, we have a saying, really people like myself push this type of saying, that now the Muslim community general, which is a multi-ethnic community in New York, all of them are being treated as if they're African Americans. And then those of us who are African American Muslims, we are what one young man called black twice. You see, and so this is a real problem. And one thing about Ray Kelly is that he has consistently over the years been in denial about the ongoing impact of institutional racism and its poisonous effect on the minds of NYPD officers. It's consistent over the past decade.
And let me say, stop, question, and frisk, I believe, is a police tool that should remain. It's just being abused in certain communities. They did a great job in trying to deal with organized crime in the Italian community. They would have never allowed something like this to go on in the Italian community. Why should we allow it to happen in our communities? And we keep having these fake dichotomy of dealing with violence and dealing with police issues. We can deal with both of those at the exact same time. And historically, the problem I have, if you go back, the violence is not new. It's changed complexion. If you go back decades, immigrant populations, people came in, Irish, Polish, Italian. There was violence. There was anti-violence marches. There were young kids killing young kids killing police officers. But the response was, there's a social problem. There's a lack of access to education. There's a lack of access to jobs. And they were flooded with social programs that would help fix that. For some reason, when the complexion of the violence changed, many, which is not an excuse, but many for the same reasons, all we did is flood it with police. They're their own worst enemy. The message changed. Well, the message should remain the same as not an excuse, but to try to get to the root of the problem. We keep trying to fix this on the back end with police when there's a lot of front end things that we can do. The mayor can't, in one hand, be trying to cut 7 beacon programs, cut half of the after-school programs, cut almost 50,000 of out-of-school time slots, cut childcare slots, and we know what happens when young people don't have anything to do, and then say we have to do 700 stop and frisk.
Yes, sir. Tell us your name and your campus, please. Speak up.
Hello, my name is Perry Litton. I'm from Brooklyn College. My question is, do you think that there is actually a federal or military type of surveillance or some type of governance given into New York City Police Department with this spying going on? Like, because I've served in the military for 8 years, and I was actually I was a human intelligence analyst, and we were taught this is what our priority list is, and a lot of the spying in some of these communities reflect what we were given in the military. Do you think there is actually a federal or military type of?
One thing that we know for sure, and that is that the federal government does give X amount of dollars to the city for counterterrorism activity. The problem is that we don't know how that money is used. And then also there's a reality of what's called cloaked funding, wherein, you know, because of the lack of accountability of the NYPD, the money is coming in, you know, a million or two or whatever, you know, number of dollars, and nobody knows how the money is being spent. So that's a definite problem. The NYPD, like any other city agency, should be held accountable for their spending of taxpayer dollars.
I think, first of all, I'm happy you shout out Brooklyn College. It's my alma mater.
Brooklyn College as well. I am.
But I do want to say, I don't know if there's a specific directive. I do know there's a blind eye turned to a lot of these things. And I take police accountability as a whole. And I do know when it came to Occupy Wall Street, there was specific instructions of how to handle certain things in a military-style setting. So if there's not clear directives on certain things like that, I think there's a blind eye turned, which is part of the problem as well.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Carmelo from Queens College, and there's been a lot of discussion about racial profiling, but not behavioral profiling. Do you think behavioral profiling would be an acceptable alternative, or would it go down the same route that we have with racial profiling?
Well, isn't that partly what Terry?
Yeah, well, this is
Ohio is about.
Again, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. The fact is that in the city of New York, most people want law enforcement that's pretty aggressive. I think that's reflected in poll after poll. So you don't want to get so far ahead. We're a democratic society. The public expects the police to protect the city. And in terms of behavioral profiling, you know, the fact is the police have to make a lot of important judgments in real time. And if you go into any police station at any given day, they get hundreds and hundreds of pieces of information that they have to kind of wade through and figure out how to use.
Figure out what's important.
Figure out what's not important, and they just can't close the doors. And there's no doubt that there's room for behavioral profiling. But all of these, I think one of the reservations I have about the approach NYPD is using is that to mount one quality intelligence operation requires you to do a tremendous amount of vetting, analysis, legal look-see, something like behavioral analysis. They really need to work hard just to do one. To have several hundred people working in intelligence raises a lot of serious questions.
I think that's an important question, actually. I think it's fundamental of what we think a criminal looks like and what we think certain people look like. So I don't look like
you're wearing a hoodie. I mean,
I'm wearing my hoodie in the city council today.
Why?
We were doing this in solidarity for Trayvon Martin. I was doing solidarity for Trayvon Martin and Ramali Graham, who's more local, who was also wearing a hoodie, John Colliato, a lot of people who were shot and killed, I believe, on the basis of their race. I have my unarmed civilian here. We wore this on the, many of us wore our hoodies on the stated council meeting today. But I think I don't look at what a person may think a councilman looks like. I have locks, I have earrings, I reek of Brooklyn, and I love hip hop. So they may not see me and think council. We have to really change the dynamic of when we see people what we think they are. And I think people see black person, hoodie, black person, and this, they think of something. There's somebody I know who has longer locks than me who actually runs the emergency room at Kings County Hospital. So we have to change the dynamic of what we believe people look like. And a lot of that has to do with race, but there are other things involved in there as well.
And yes, it does cut across, lines of religion. When Amadou Diallo was unmercifully gunned down, standing on the stoop of his home, 42 shots. The police officers in that street crime unit, they didn't know that he was a Muslim. They didn't know that he was a devout Muslim who just went to school, sold things on the street, and went to the mosque and prayed. They did know, however, that he was black. They did know, however, that he lived in an economically depressed area of the Bronx. They found out that he was Muslim later. So all of these problems, racial profiling, ethnic profiling, religious profiling, all of these things are connected. I mean, with regards to domestic terrorism, we know that in this country we have, militia. We know that, for instance, the Oklahoma City bombing, when the Oklahoma City bombing first happened, these so-called experts like Stephen Emerson and guys like that, they immediately went to the press and said the Muslims did it. Right. Then when it turned out, and also when you say the Muslims did it, that's also cloaked language, because when people think of Muslims, they think of people of color. So now when it turned out that domestic terrorist was white, he was male, he had a crew cut, he
Christian identity.
A Christian identity. No one went around profiling white crew cut Christian identity Americans. No one started infiltrating or surveilling churches in the Midwest.
Can I say one thing on that? Because I posed this to Commissioner Kelly a few times. It always sounds like a joke, but it's not. And I say, why can't we have some profiling and stop and peek for white men in suits and briefcases coming out of banks or coming out of Wall Street? We may prevent the next economic collapse. And his response is that that's a federal issue. Except terrorism is a federal issue. And we thought it important enough to try to find a way to work with the federal government or outside of the federal government to attack that issue. I think the crime and the economic crimes that cause a lot of these lower crimes is just as important to find a way to do.
And Ray Kelly, of course, has police officers in London and Islamabad and where else? In Tel Aviv.
Economic capitals.
And in the Dominican, in Santo Domingo, for some reason, God only knows what that's
The thing is, the police is watching everyone. The question is, who's watching the police?
Well, I think, yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Josiane Leacock. I'm from McGivers College. My question is, you were trying, Mr. Williams, you were saying that you were trying to get some type of legislation passed so that we could have some type of monitoring of the police service. What I would like to know as a college student, as a mother of a black son, is what am I to do as a regular civilian to help you in your quest to get some type of monitoring done? Because if you are saying that our representatives are copping out on you, what are we to do?
I'm looking at you.
No, you could look at those. You could answer. Right.
That's an excellent question. And one thing you could do is, one, know that this legislation we're trying to get passed. Two, make sure you call your city council members and your state legislators to say that this legislation is going on. You want to call the speaker of the city council. You want to call the mayor. You want to call everybody, let them know that there is political will in the public to get these type of legislations passed. Sometimes, as I said, in the city council, this is a larger discussion, but the charter prevents us from doing some stuff. So we pushed the envelope a little bit. We did some research to find out what we think we can do within the charter. But it's still going to take political will because we're going to have to defend the laws. But particularly now, in a year next 2 years is going to be some heavy campaigning going on. We want to make sure that people understand that these issues are very important to all of us, and anyone who wants to become the next mayor, become the next anything, has to say that they are really, really understand this is an important issue, and laws and bills like this one are important to the public.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Violetta. I'm from Brooklyn College. In light of the recent AP reports, I was wondering if any of you are calling for the resignation of Ray Kelly and or Mayor Bloomberg.
Yes, actually, the Muslim community has been calling for Ray Kelly's resignation for months. And when we first started doing so, there were people who laughed at us and dismissed our concerns. Certainly the general attitude of both the mayor and the police commissioner to this growing body of criticism has ranged from a kind of smug, arrogant dismissal. The mayor saying, oh, they're just out for some publicity, all the way over to conspiracy theories. The mayor and the police commissioner are backed by people like Congressman Peter King, have put forth this rhetoric that, as the police commissioner said, we're being attacked by the Associated Press. And they're acting as if there's some kind of conspiracy in the media to give the NYPD a bad name. And so, yeah, the answer to that question, certainly from the Muslim community, is yes. We're still insisting that Ray Kelly resign.
I can't. I wish the mayor would resign. I can't wait till January 2014.
Neither can I.
The mayor. I have held back from asking for the resignation of Ray Kelly for two reasons. One, once I do that, it changes the conversations that I can have with certain people. And two, it's important to note that I want the policies and procedures changed. A new commissioner doesn't necessarily mean new policies and procedures.
Right.
If the mayor who's there doesn't really want to show that he cares about the problems that I'm talking about.
Exactly. Then Ray Kelly came back into office, and when he was police commissioner under Dinkins, there was a sense that Ray Kelly was more connected to the community at large than a prisoner of that strange puzzle palace at One Police Plaza. But is he very much focused inward as opposed to outward now?
But he's focused. Well, let me just stay to start off with. Remember, he was David Dinkins' police commissioner. He went out of his way to go to black churches all around the city to recruit minority officers. Ray Kelly is a very capable man, but what's happened is that, as everybody said, with no accountability, with no supervision, he has really let his ego get out of control, and what he's most interested in is his image. And he can't get along with any other law enforcement association. They've been feuding with the FBI, whose job it is to fight terrorists. And the three people who they make a big fuss of, the terrorists they've arrested, these three guys starting with Siraj Matan with the Herald Square bombing, then this guy Farhani with supposedly blowing up the synagogues, and then this last one, Pimentel, guy who circumcised himself in his apartment. These are people with mental problems. And they're doing it all by themselves. They don't want any assistance from anybody else. That's unfortunately what's happened to Ray Kelly. He's playing God. And
that's a very important point. If you look at several of these cases of the Muslim domestic terrorists, there are people with IQs of 65, 67, 68, really, severely mentally challenged. And one of the tactics of the NYPD has been to sick an undercover provocateur on them, lead them through the mechanics of this, and then arrest them. And then, we in the Muslim community, we found it very almost laughable that after we had our first major demonstration at One Police Plaza against these type of tactics, it was back during November, that the demonstration was on a Friday, and then 2 days later on Sunday, they came out with Pimentel.
Right.
you know, saying, see, this is why this is effective, but they never talked about Pimentel's psychiatric history. And that was one case where the feds looked at the case and were very uncomfortable with, you know, following through and prosecuting, so they backed away. These things are transparent. They're not dealing with the real problems.
Could I just add, I think it would be good for the organization to have term limits there, to have one term of 6 years for the commissioner. The next commissioner should serve no longer than 6 years. It's stultifying for the agency, and that's not about Ray Kelly. The people at the top of the agency end up swearing their allegiance to the person in charge rather than to the people of the city. So it would just be very good to have that turnover, never again to have a repeat. I think in a lot of ways Commissioner Kelly's been a good commissioner, but I just think if you know the way the police department operates, and Lenny does, it's not helpful for an organization to have somebody at the helm there with so much power, because as a practical matter, most of what the police do cannot be reviewed on a day-to-day basis. There's not enough courts, there's not enough lawsuits, there's not enough. Police have to be doing stuff that's righteous and has to be well-motivated. Frontline cops have to have the right intentions. The institution has to drive good conduct. And to have a commissioner there for more than 6 years now, we're going on a decade. If you know that organization, it has not been helpful to have one person at the top.
Well, the same could be said of the mayor, but
Yeah, well,
look what he
I want
did.
to say also the arrogance that was discussed is pervasive in the administration, period. Like, there's a unique kind of hubris that we haven't seen in a long time. So whether it's the mayor in policing, the mayor in education, the mayor in contracts, he won't listen to anyone when he's dead wrong, and even the stats show it, and that's a problem as well.
And what did the mayor do? He bribed the city council to change the two-term limit law. I mean, what is more corrupting than that?
We need leadership, political leadership.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Melissa Garcia, and I attend Queens College. My question can be addressed to anyone on the panel tonight. I'd like to know if you believe that if there were stricter gun control laws, there would be less of a need for this stop and frisk method today.
Well, we have about as strict gun laws as exist in the country.
Well, we have an absurd situation where guns can be brought in here quite easily. They can be bought in other states, and that is a very good question, because the police we have an absurd situation where the police are kind of the stopgap for our insane lack of control of guns. I mean, there's just too many guns in circulation. It's too easy to get a hold of guns. It's too easy to traffic guns, and they end up in the streets of Brooklyn killing innocent people. So, and I do want to say, because it is important, that this is a city that did have 2,200 homicides, and we can never forget that over a course of a 10-year period. If you moved out from 90 and had that for 10 years, you'd have 20,000 people dead. And you could look at precinct maps in this city, in precincts that I worked in, and if you put the dots on the map, there wouldn't be any room on that map. I used to use a murder map in New York City, throw up on the board, and my students would gasp because they literally could not believe that. So we don't want to get too far ahead of this in terms of denying the reality that the city was a very dangerous place, and a lot of people are alive because it's not. Why that is in terms of policing strategies is a very debatable topic, but we should welcome it. We shouldn't take it for granted, but this is a very good conversation that we should have about what the right size of enforcement, stop and frisk is.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Uthman Baksh, and I attend Brooklyn College. And my question is for the panel in general. In regards to the NYPD spying on Muslim students in CUNY, while it was going on, was CUNY notified at all that this was going on?
Well, I can answer that. They were not at all. And again, the fault of this is, when it came out, is the fault of the city university chancellor, who has to this day not said one word about it.
I'm sorry, I also want to back up to one of the things we were talking about before about the gun control, because I don't want to lose sight of certain things. I think we have to have all these discussions at the same time. The gun control with the other states, and particularly federally, we need to have more social programs. But we also have to always continue and keep a watch on the NYPD, because where there's stop and frisk, the abuses that happen usually happen in the Black and Latino communities and poor communities, whatever it is. So we need to have better gun control, but we need to make sure that whatever the police department is doing is equitable across the board.
So what we're saying is that this is a holistic problem, and it needs a holistic solution, not a piecemeal here, a piecemeal there, as if all of these different pieces have no relationship one to another.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Sadia Zaman, and I attend John Jay College. This question is specifically for Mr. William and Mr. O'Donnell. Mr. Williams, I know in the last two state meetings, you have mentioned a lot of things from profiling to the Haitian problems. My question is there any specific council member that are working on any specific legislation at the moment that, specifically it's about the Muslim profiling? Like, is anyone at all that concentrating?
I don't know if there's one specific to Muslim profiling. There also isn't one specific to stop and frisk. It's hard for us to hone in on some of these things because of what we're limited to. So we do have legislation. I had some legislation in about trying to make sure that police officers give out business cards if they're stopping you and they don't arrest you, so you have this information to lessen the tension. I have ones about informing you that you have the right not to be searched. We have a legislation trying to change the definition of from intentionally discriminating to disparate impact, which means you can't discriminate even if it has an impact that you didn't intend it having. So we have to find creative ways to do this. There are a lot of colleagues that have signed on to my legislation. I'm part of the Progressive Caucus in the City Council, so a lot of them are signed on to it. I'm working with my colleague Brad Lander to do an Inspector General's bill, which will hopefully cause some more oversight as well. So there are a lot of things going on. We have to be creative and trying to make sure that whatever it is that we create will be backed up when the mayor, if it goes to be voted on, when the mayor most undoubtedly would try to veto it.
Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Kenneth Falk. I'm a student at McEvans College. I've been working on stop and frisk for maybe about 15, close to 20 years with a woman named Sandra Roper. One of the things that has gone on is the language that's involved. All the mayors, the police commissioner, keep referring to it as a war on crime. War can only be fought from the outside in. When will the police action take place? Do you believe that if police officers lived in the community or at least did their training in the communities, would they have a better feeling toward us?
The answer is yes.
I think language is very important. Right.
Again, it's holistic. So the immediate answer is yes. The diversity issue is yes. By the way, I want to mention that most of the diversity happened to the rank and file police officers. We still need more diversity on the leadership, which have oversight over the rank and file. But all these things, I think, would make it better. We do need an acknowledgement, first of all, from the mayor and the commissioner that there's a problem to begin with, because they don't acknowledge the impact that these things are happening.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Rogowsky Internship from Queens College. You kind of touched on this earlier, but I wanted to know if you had ideas of specific reforms to increase accountability in the NYPD or with Mayor Bloomberg and the commissioner.
Well, I don't want to keep saying this. I'm repeating myself, but I do see this at bottom as mostly a political issue. The cops it's a quasi-military organization. If they're led properly and they're directed properly, you'll get what you get on the ground. It's not the cops' idea to do 700,000 frisks. They are bristling at this.
A lot of them
they do not want to do this. They do not want to do this. They didn't take the job to be put into this kind of a position. So can you roll this back? I would sound the warning for people that are looking forward to next year to the mayoral race that I think there's evidence that the residents of the city are a lot harder nosed on crime than we want to say. And if you were around, and I was around, I worked for David Dinkins, I was there, and he lost an election, and arguably he lost an election because this issue was exploited. It was exploited that he was soft on crime, and that Giuliani was going to be tough on crime. And I fully expected that Bloomberg and Kelly, when they were elected, would distance themselves from that. They did not distance themselves from that. So as I think we have a large progressive field, but they have to be very careful not to get too far in front. The public still does not want to see marijuana sold on their streets. They do not want to see people carrying guns. They want the cops to be aggressive. They're going to have to lead, and they're going to have to try to reconcile public positions with public sentiment throughout the city. By the way, that's in the 5 boroughs. That's neighborhood to neighborhood. There's a tremendous amount of support for aggressive policing. So it's going to take some leadership to explain any changes.
People in the Muslim community generally, and people in the African American community ethnically, we're anti-crime. You know, what we're against is the injustice and the abuse.
There's no one in these communities, the Black Latino communities, that want the violence to go down more than the Black Latino communities. I do think, at least now, there are some public sentiment starting to change and go the other way.
Let me get one more question in. Yes, ma'am?
Hi, good evening. My name is Rizana Farouk. I'm from John Jay College. My question is toward the whole panel. Is there any way NYPD can guarantee me that any type of investigation will not impact me getting a job in federal, state, or city level? I say this because I am a Muslim American and involved with several local organizations in the Bengali community. I drive my grandmother and 15 to 18 of my community members to mosque on Fridays. I was pulled over twice and was asked what was my purpose in there. I was let go and always dismissed as they were doing their job. Right now, I'm concerned that there might be investigation open and will impact me getting a job in the Foreign Service or even running for political office.
Let me, because we're running short of time.
I think you should file a Freedom of Information application and try to see, you know, exactly whether or not there's a file on you.
Yeah, this is a huge concern. One of the concerns that we have with the marijuana arrest, because it does leave a record. One thing I applaud Mayor Bloomberg for doing is preventing now, at least in New York City, people can't ask that question until second or third interview. But it's a huge problem. You should be concerned, and that's one of the things we're concerned about, because these records are not expunged on the rate.
We only have 30 seconds left. Let me ask you, what do you advise? You know, we could talk about civil liberties. These are people's lives in the line. What do you tell young African American men, young Muslim men, about dealing with the police on the street?
We tell them, number one, learn the law. We tell them, you know, don't break the law, stay away from, you know, questionable activity. And three, we tell everyone that we're out of time.
But thank you.
And get out alive. When you meet with a police officer, leave alive. That's
Leave
what
alive.
Leave alive.
Thank you very much. We have run out of time. I never miss deadline. We'll see you next time on the CUNY Forum.